About a month ago, I got to do something pretty cool. I got to take my 1984 Honda VF500F to a track for the first time. So I'd basically just gotten done going through and finishing up my full refresh on the thing, including painting it and doing a replica of the 1984 color scheme, except in my favorite scheme, which is the black, yellow, and white, which is sort of ripped off from Yamaha. Anyway, I thought in this video I'd talk you through a little bit of that experience, talk a bit about the bike while we're getting ready to go on the track, and then I'll talk you through some of the track riding, which was interesting, to say the least. So a couple of the things that I worked on to get this bike ready to go onto the track was to address some of the suspension issues, go through the brakes, and then try to address what is one of the weaknesses of this bike, which is oiling. It doesn't have the infamous chocolate cams that the first generation bigger brother Interceptors did, but it does have some oiling issues, so I transplanted a 1986 oil pump, which is a little beefier in there, along with the bigger sump from the 86, and I'm running a 30 micron filter as opposed to a 20 micron filter. The shocks were redone with Racetech gold valve emulators and .85 sonic springs up front, and then the rear was done with a YSS emulsion shock in the back. Now, these things were pretty legendary for having great handling, and that's true on the street, but go watch some of the VF500 Cup from 1986 and tell me those look like good handling bikes. They're all over the place, and the rear shock that comes stock on these things is one of the worst shocks that's ever been put onto a motorcycle.
Tail enders, the leaders sweep down Devil's Elbow to complete 11 laps. 4 more laps to go, and this the traffic jam that they've got to sort out. You can see the bike bobbing and weaving as Dave Leach goes round the outside. It's a brave manoeuvre, but if he can get through, it will do it. Just 0.6 seconds separating first to third as they went past us, but these tail enders may make a difference now.
So that was all addressed. A couple other things that I really needed to do, I needed to do this. I needed to figure out how to get an adjustable front brake lever on here. This is some, I don't even know, I bought like probably 4 or 5 different levers over the course of time, and finally got one that worked on a replacement master cylinder, and this was always going to be a weak spot of this bike. I did source some AliExpress preload adjusters on the top, which was useful once we got to the track. And then front steering bearings, those are all redone. Pretty much everything got redone that I thought was going to be an issue on the track. The one thing I never did do, and I don't know that I'm going to do it, but if I ever wanted to get serious about riding this bike on the track, the rear sets are really difficult. You have a really standard riding position on this bike, especially compared to what I'm used to, which this SV is set up fairly aggressive ergonomically. You can see how low the clip-ons and stuff are. This is much more like riding a standard bike, and I'd never been on track doing anything like that. So rear sets on a bike like this, it's not as simple. There's not a whole lot of options. There may be a set that I can actually go to at some point, but you see it's not a plug-and-play solution for the most part on here. So that caught me off guard several times. I was flipping these things up. I pulled the feelers out. Blackhawk Farms has some pretty aggressive curbs, and I caught those several times out there, so I really had to give some thought about not trying to go anywhere near those curbs, because that was pretty scary. But I would say the rear sets is the #1 thing if I wanted to get more serious about riding this bike on the track, that I'd want to address that. But yeah, besides that, I mean, the motor worked awesome. This bike is heavy. It's about 435 pounds wet and has about 50 to 52 horsepower maybe. People always see that 68 horsepower that was published by Honda and equate it to something like an SV650. That's not horsepower at the wheel, that's horsepower at the crank. So this thing it's a lot slower. So yeah, with a much heavier bike than I'm used to riding, with worse brakes, it was always going to present a challenge as well. But in my unbiased opinion, it was the best sounding bike there. You know, one last thing that I wanted to point out that I was actually worried about was the tires. So these are like 3-year-old BT45s, but the bigger issue is that this bike has an 18-inch rear and a 16-inch front, which rules out any modern rubber. And the profiles on these are so much different. Actually, the front is a better description or visual of it. You can see, actually this side will show better light. You can see these tires are super tall, and there's a ton of sidewall. This is a 190, and I never get to the front edge on my SV, which is a 120/70 front. On here, I had no idea where you go over and run out of tire, and I wasn't really interested in finding out. So if you compare that to say like an SV650, you can see how short that sidewall is on a 120/70 modern front, and I don't use the full front tire despite getting most of the rear tire used. But on here on the front, it looked like I was getting close to going over the edge, which just emphasizes that I need to work on better body position to reduce my lean angle. So we're getting ready to go here. Blackhawk Farms Green Group on Labor Day. So there's an SV650 in front of me. I always lined up in the slowest lane because I didn't want to get in people's way. After the first two sessions, after the first session, I thought I was going to die. And why I thought that is because the 16-inch front with so much less weight on it was so twitchy. I wasn't used to it at all, and I could feel the thing skidding. So after the first two sessions, I took out all the preload that I could, and I talked to the lead instructor, and I said, "You will not hurt my feelings if you put me back to a slower group today." And he looked at me, he's like, "Can you hold your lines?" I said, "Absolutely, I can hold my lines. I'm just going to be going real slow." He said, "You're going to be fine." So after I took most of the preload out of the front, I felt a lot better. This turn 2, believe it or not, that was the scariest turn for me all day because I just didn't have weight up there. I wasn't used to it. So these warm-up laps were always interesting for me because normally warm-up lap, you ride behind the CR for a lap and kind of just chill, get used to things, get a little heat in the tires. I had no idea how these tires were going to respond. It was really warm this day. This is about 93 degrees. And I didn't want to end up sliding a bit, but I also didn't want to fall way too far behind from them. So you can see when they start to take off, they can really take off from me. I should be able to keep up more so a bit with the SV650. I thought when I was coming into the day, I didn't think there would actually be that big of a speed discrepancy. And you can see it just ends up taking off from me. So now I'm starting to feel a little bit better about things. This is the last session that I did of the day. This is the 6th session. I skipped the last 2. I felt like I cheated death too many times. So we are going to be coming up onto our hot lap here. Normally the CR pulls over, waits you by. There's no way in hell I'm going to be able to catch up and get by him. So it took a little bit to learn the gearing on here. It wasn't too much different than the SV650 that I'm used to, but I had to throw in a bunch of extra gears in certain spots. So I do use 6, and you almost get to topping the thing out. I threw an aim solo in the back for this one session just to see. I wanted to see what my lap times were, and it gives you GPS readings of your overall speed. And I had 98 miles an hour, 98 exact. Damn it. I feel like if I get rid of a little bit of that brake drag, I could have broken 100. This bus stop area is the one section of the track where I actually felt like this bike handled better than my SV650, which gave me something to think about on how I actually want to change that going into next year. This curb here in 6 was the first time I really clipped one of my lower foot pegs, so I'm just staying away from curbs. I decided that. I knew I was going to call it after this session, and while I was curious to see what my lap times were going to be. I was going to get nowhere near those curbs again. I didn't want to throw this thing under the ground. This was the first time I was ever trying to clutchless. Hey, there's a thumbs up as he goes by. This is the first time I was ever trying to clutchless upshift this bike, which you'll hear becomes an issue because I'm not very good at it, and it was popping out of gear a couple of times. Right there. So once I have that happen once or twice, I usually for the next half a lap or so, or maybe even a full lap. Is there a guy in? One of these laps is going to be somebody off in that corner in the dirt. I usually end up just starting to clutch upshift because I lose confidence that I'm going to hit it correctly. So this part especially, after 4, when I straightened up a little bit, I had a habit of accidentally flipping up that left foot peg, and I'd have to like push it back down before I got to 5, which was an added sense of urgency. Everything looks slow motion because it just isn't a fast bike, but in my head, it sure looked like things were coming up very quickly. It's funny watching the footage after the fact because it sure feels a hell of a lot faster when you're out there. Nice day though, real nice day. So I know that watching all of those bikes come out when we were taking to the track, that at some point they're all going to catch me. At least I assume they're going to catch me. So I always try to leave as much space as possible in most of these turns, and sometimes take a non-optimal line just to make sure, because with the 6-foot passing rules, I don't like to take liberties with people at track days. I like to make it easier for people. Turn 1, I also clipped a curb early, which is why I get that one a wide berth. But yeah, turn 2 was absolutely the hardest one. It was the most gut-wrenching one, and I looked so damn slow through it because I was pulling myself up to get weight over that front wheel, which I never had to do before, and maybe I didn't have to do it, but it's just so different from something that I'm used to that I wanted to do every single thing I could to keep weight on that front tire. It gets rougher and rougher with my shifting, unfortunately. But it may not look like it because I don't really get off the bike as much as some people do. But this track day was actually really useful for me so that I could put it towards my SV650, in that I saw just how important having to get over body style, body position wise was, and how it would actually affect the bike. And that became important when I really screwed up something on my suspension for the last race of the year with Az right here. And it allowed me to put up some better times than I thought I'd be able to, given how badly I screwed up the suspension before the last race weekend. Coming into turn 1, I was trying to drive it as deep as I could, and I doubt I'm even getting as far as I was on my SV650. So the SV hits about 113 miles an hour. That's normally what the AIM says is my fastest speed on this track. So I'm coming in a lot slower, but I also had a way less, that's where the guy's off in the carousel. I also had way less braking power than the SV650. So these are EDC HH sintered pads, which honestly, they work pretty darn well. They just don't have the bite that I would like, and they didn't have the same braking power that I get out of the SV. And I've been told that the SV on the Stockmaster and calipers is not that great, so I can only imagine what, something modern is like. Never once had any issues with grip on this bike. Obviously, if you're looking at this, you're like, of course you wouldn't. You're not going fast enough, you idiot. That's true. I was worried about where the tire profile was, and I didn't know where the end of the usable tire was. ICR. And I wasn't interested in finding out. Super different riding around on a track on a bike that you don't want to throw onto the ground at all. Not like I want to throw my SV650 onto the ground, but I accept that I could. And worst comes to worst, I can find a race-ready SV650 for $2,500. I don't want to do that, not at all, because I know whatever medical expenses are going to be are going to destroy that. But I can't easily replace this VF500F, not in the trim that I've got it set out to, and not the meaning that it has to me. So I can see I've already forgotten what gear I'm in. I'm in a gear too high, which is why I'm going so slow through here, because it had popped out of gear earlier, and I thought it was down 1. This isn't me waiting for a caution or something. This is me thinking I'm in a lower gear than I am. I won't figure it out until turn 5. I think I've probably figured it out right now that we're going even slower than before. Yeah, so the first 3 laps of this video, I ran a it was that taking about a gear again. It just popped out. So now I have to quickly figure out what gear I'm in, and then don't slip it too badly going into this corner. The first 3 laps of this session I ran within a half second of each other, and they were all about 131.5 to 131.9, I think. Which, I mean, that's a slow lap at Blackhawk Farms. The quickest lap I ran on the SV650 this year was a 120.577. I really thought this bike would only be 6-7 seconds slower than that. It turns out it's quite a bit, and it's not because of handling. Partially it's because of ergonomics, and partially it just doesn't have guts compared to a much more torquey V-twin. But I went out to the Armor race hoping that I'd get to see a VF500F out there, and hopefully get to talk to the owner, because I know that there is one that's running, but unfortunately I think it blew a motor the week before, so it's like, come on, really? I did get to see a VFR750 going around, which is pretty neat, but I really wanted to see whatever type of rear setup that the guy has that actually runs one of these things in Arma. Not that I think I have a bug up my butt yet to actually want to start racing Arma on this bike, but I mean, obviously I have to figure out a whole lot of stuff before I could actually be competitive. I'd get lapped within 3 laps of going out there. But it's certainly something to think about, and it's fun to have dreams, right? Yeah, so this is obviously a pretty long video, but I put a lot of work into putting this day together and getting to do this, so too bad. If you want to know more about riding the Honda VF500F out on a track, I put together a much more detailed write-up on the VFR World forums, on the track day forums there. So I appreciate anybody that launched these things or gave me a hand. Steve and his wife gave me a bunch of help to make this day happen, and it was a stressful day for me. It was full of anxiety, and it was super fun, super memorable, and I'm already looking forward to next year. So, you watched this far.